So I went to see a Mexican magician the other day, and he was like, "Oh, I can make myself disappear." And we're like, "Okay, let's see." And he goes, "Uno, dos," and then he was just gone. He disappeared without a trace.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to Taste Like Music. Jason, Joe, and Crams are here, and it is Thin Lizzy week. This was a fun one. 12 studio albums. Haven't done really a hard rock artist like this in a minute. I don't even know what the last one we did was.
The Darkness.
Well, I guess, but not like this is like classic. You know, we haven't done a classic hard rock band in a minute.
It's because most of them have like 28 to 42 albums, and it's just obnoxious. But yeah, what was the last one? Can't even think. AC/DC? Maiden.
But anyways, here we go. 12 studio albums. If you are new to the channel, we cover a different artist every single week. Sometimes they are bands and artists that we know and love. Sometimes there are bands that are kind of new to us. Sometimes we don't like the artist at hand. So you never know quite what you're going to get. But we rank all the studio albums on Tuesday, do top 10 songs on Wednesday, and then have a third discussion video every Thursday. If that sounds like something you're into, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. And so how are we going into this? How much Thin Lizzy have we heard before?
Not a lot. I mean, some. Everyone's heard The Boys Are Back in Town, of course. As far as whole albums, Johnny the Fox, Jailbreak, assorted songs from the rest of them, but wasn't too familiar with their early stuff or their later stuff. It's sort of give me that like 75 to 78. You know, I'm pretty familiar with that, but outside of that, I was pretty unaware of what the heck they were doing.
I'm a pretty big Thin Lizzy guy. I had a couple mixes that I made off my old LimeWire downloads in high school, and I know going into this that I knew the debut, Johnny the Fox, Bad Reputation, Jailbreak, Black Rose, and Fighting. So half of the albums, then probably at least 25 to 35% more of those other songs, just from kind of filtering them in off downloads. Jailbreak I nominated in a weaker year, 76. But I mean, a couple weeks ago we did Tom Waits, and even though I enjoyed Tom Waits, it wasn't really something that I was in the mood for. This week hit home for me as far as just like what I wanted. I just needed a good, I mean, they're a hard rock band, but it was kind of relaxing for me, just drinking some beers and putting on Thin Lizzy and not having to analyze too much of the music. It was pretty nice. It was a fun week. I enjoyed the hell out of it.
I enjoyed the week a lot too, especially at like going back on second listen. I was falling in love with a lot of these songs. Going into the week, I knew the classic era very well, I would say. I know Fighting and Jailbreak and Johnny the Fox, Bad Reputation. I know those records. And I also had a greatest hits collection growing up. So I know assortments of the other ends of the discography, a couple early tracks, some of the 80s stuff a little bit. But yeah, I guess we can jump into it. 12 records. We're just going to go one by one. Who's starting?
I'm going to start us off with Renegade. I did not like this one much. I think it's pretty weak. This is one, you have Snowy White coming in on guitar, along with Scott Gorham. And I don't know, there's just something like missing here. I think Phil's voice is starting to really kind of go downhill. It was so strong during, Jailbreak. And even into Black Rose, and then you kind of on Chinatown, I feel like you can kind of hear it going downhill a little bit. On this, he sounds tired. He sounds, I don't know, drugged out, whatever. The guitar riffs and the leads are pretty weak on this one. There's more keyboards because they got a keyboardist, but I don't know, it all just kind of feels weak, tired. Nothing really interesting here. I don't care what Martin Popoff says. It's not a 10 out of a 10. It's 2 stars for me. Would not recommend.
I also don't care what Martin Popoff says, and I don't care what our Patreon supporters think of you either, my friend. They all thought you were going to put the 80s stuff towards the top. You're not crazy. 12 is Renegade for me as well. Yeah, you get those huge synth sound effects at the beginning, like they just watched Blade Runner and we're like, so cool, let's do this. Embracing a little bit more metal, but not enough for it to be like all in. And even the little bit of like the British metal stuff they try to do is a little bit to its detriment. Not as good. The album's not a total lost cause. I have it at 2 stars, so it's not an abomination, but it's pretty bad. Not playing to their strengths. Yeah, Phil Lynott's voice is kind of going, or at least he doesn't seem to care really on these last couple albums. Like you can tell that he's just not putting it in there. Doesn't have the guitar hooks, doesn't have the vocal performances. Title track is really weird. He's like trying to do this weird Mark Knopfler thing. It's like, you don't have to try to be anyone else, Phil. You're Phil. It's awesome. You know, they seem kind of, it would be one thing if they came into this like really invigorated and passionate and being like, we want to do this cool kind of proggy 80s metal with synth touches, but it doesn't feel like it's like a passion project. It feels like they're just kind of lost and have like some ideas that they kind of half-heartedly just throw onto the page here. Hollywood's really corny. All of the power and attitude and just good hard rock is kind of gone. Even the guitar work is pretty basic for them, so nothing exciting. My blood doesn't pump. 2 stars, number 12, Renegade.
Right, interesting. Bottom for me is Shades of a Blue Orphanage. I think this is a really disappointing effort. It doesn't deliver on the promise of the debut at all. It is a step closer towards hard rock and the sound that they would eventually end up having as their signature sound, while the debut is a little on the folkier side. But I don't know. I just think that the songwriting and the production just really let it down. The opener really just feels like a jam that they threw some lyrics over top of. And I think that suspicion is supported by the fact that every member of the band has a writing credit on it. It's like, we were just jamming. We'll just credit everybody, because a lot of the songs in the discography are not credited that way. So I think maybe they were cutting some corners in the writing department, maybe a little bit rushed. I Don't Want to Forget How to Jive, I think, is basically like the definition of filler. It's like this 50s rock thing where he's doing like an Elvis impersonation and it fades out before the 2-minute mark. The drum sounds on the record, I think, are pretty lousy throughout. It sounds like a starter drum kit or something. It sounds pretty bad. And it doesn't match the level or intensity of the rest of the band. The drums just sound so like small and distant. Like I said, it begins the evolution of their sound towards something a little more hard rock, but I think they were getting a little ahead of themselves. They didn't quite have the ability to capture the sound they were going for, I don't think. And I think they should have just taken a bit more time to come up with better material. Buffalo Gal, though, I think is a pretty good song. That's basically the lone standout here for me. 2.5 stars for me.
Okay, my number 11, I got Thunder and Lightning, disappointing everyone who thought I'd go this 80s route. No idea. I know John Sykes, who I didn't know who he was. I knew I loved his work on Whitesnake 87. No idea who he was. And maybe it's because he really hasn't done much before this, because there's a lot of like impressive like speed on this album, but I would never have known they were the same person, same guitarist who did this in Whitesnake 87. Just unmemorable songs. And the guitar, you know, when I saw that John Sykes was on this, I was like, all right, at least he'll have some killer guitar. I mean, it's technically great, but like really boring. Like none of these catch my ear at all until the very last track, Heart Attack, which is excellent. But everything else, you know, Phil's just not into it. I feel like his songwriting, it just sounds a little wimpy, especially when you know this is 83 compared to like Priest and Maiden and these other bands that sort of, you know, developed their own twin guitar attack. This one just sounds a little wimpy to me. Baby Please Don't Go's decent. Kind of sounds like Any Money though, and I don't know. It just doesn't seem to have like that like je ne sais quoi that Thin Lizzy had in the late 70s, where like they're this unique sort of interesting band. Now it just sounds like they're trying to like fit into the 80s with like this last gasp at metal, and just doesn't work for me. So I don't think it's nearly as bad as Renegade though. I got it 3 stars, definitely step up. Snowy White not being at all involved in the band is a good thing. Sykes is much better than him, so at least that's there. But I don't know, the production's not great, Phil's not great, so it's 3 stars. It's fine, but yeah, I was hoping for a little bit more from 80s Thin Lizzy.
Apt analysis, my friend. My number 11 is Thunder and the Lightning. And it is definitely better than Renegade. I'll go up to 2.5 stars here. And good call. The thing about that makes Thin Lizzy great isn't that they're, I mean, obviously the obvious reasons is killer hard rock band with amazing guitar riffs and guitar sound and a great lead singer. But they're also far more interesting than that. Like at the heart of their best stuff is like Irish folk music just turned the hell up. So when they do Thunder and Lightning, you're right. It's like they're a 70s hard rock band that is now in the 80s, and they're just like standing there with their dicks in the wind a little bit. Like, what are we supposed to do here? And they try a little bit of touches of everything. It doesn't really work. The guitar sound and the solo on the title track is absolutely preposterous for a Thin Lizzy album. It's preposterous for most bands except maybe Dragon Force. I don't know. It's really out there. It sounds terrible. And also with these last 2 albums, it barely feels like Phil is the leader of the band anymore. It feels like he's just like, whatever, I'll show up, I'm the front man. It's not like his vision of the band anymore is like these big, like, you know, old blue collar Irish folktale kind of songs that come from his perspective. It's just all of that is kind of disintegrated. Even the way he sings now is kind of like overdubbed and overlayered, and you don't really get the same kind of soul in it. The songs aren't terrible, but you know, a lot of them are just kind of bland, mediocre 80s metal songs like Cold Sweat. Doesn't have that much interesting stuff going on. And even the songs I kind of don't mind on here remind me of other songs, like you were saying, like Maiden or Priest or, you know, Touch of the Scorpions or something. And it just reminds me of better stuff like that, bands that do this better. So yeah, they feel a little bit lost. It's not a totally bad album. It's decent because it's still Thin Lizzy and they still know how to rock and the guitars are decent enough. So gets a decent score. Number 11, 2.5 stars, Thunder and Lightning.
My number 11 is Chinatown from 1980. This is the first one with Snowy White, who replaced Gary Moore, who was only there for 1 album. It kind of has the Thin Lizzy sound, but also not really. The production's pretty weak. I don't think the songs are really there. The variety has been sucked from their sound. They're basically just focusing on like being a streamlined hard rock, bordering on heavy metal type of band at this point. And things are starting to feel a little bit cheesy, I think. Also, Phil's drug problem around this time is starting to worsen. I think you can kind of tell in his vocals. It's not a terrible record, but it's pretty uninteresting. And the reason I have it below the other late period records is that I think on those later records, on Renegade and on Thunder and Lightning, I think those records at least kind of have like some like pop metal type of hooks that are better. This doesn't even have that. This isn't catchy, but it also isn't interesting. It's not really that heavy because the production is so weak. I don't know. This record is just like a big nothing to me. So staying at 2.5 stars for this one, Chinatown.
My number 10, I got Shades of a Blue Orphanage, their sophomore effort. I don't know. This one was tough for me to place. I think Phil sounds amazing. I love how he sounds on these early records. Like he's got like this kind of folky thing going. You know, you got Eric Bell kind of bringing in like that. You know, you get like that Van Morrison vibe. Bell was in them with Van Morrison. And so you get kind of this Irish folk mixed in with like these hard rock leanings. It's really interesting sounding. And I kind of wish they had stayed with this sound more. Because they were still kind of working it out here, though, and just the songwriting isn't quite where it can be. I do like the Mellotron on Shades of a Blue Orphanage, but the Rise and Dear Demise just feels like underbaked, uninteresting, and it kicks off the album, so it kind of puts you like right out of it, right off the bat. I agree with Jason, the Buffalo Gal is pretty good. Sarah's pretty. Lynott's vocals, like they got like so much soul in them here. And Bell's doing some nice stuff on guitar, but it just like doesn't quite come together for me. I don't know. Jason felt the same way, I guess. So maybe that's not a like weird thing. And it kind of falls apart. I don't know. One of the biggest problems I have with the band is just like inconsistency. A lot of these albums, like they'll start off great, or they'll start off terrible and get like really good at the end, or start off, you know, first 3 tracks are killer. I'm like, oh, this is my new favorite album. And then it's like, oh, 5 filler songs. And I feel like on this one, kind of in the middle, I don't know, it falls apart. Call the Police, Shouting Today, Babyface, just do nothing for me. So I have it at 3 stars. It's just not great, I guess is all I can say about an album like this. Cool sound, the songwriting just is not there.
All right, my number 10. Are Joe and I going to go the distance on this whole damn thing? I've also got Shades of a Blue Orphanage, and I agree pretty much with everything you said. Kind of plays off the debut and is also a stepping stone to, you know, their classic period, but doesn't quite have the marriage to really make it a really good complete effort. Lead off track is big and epic and strong, and I like kind of the great lighter guitar playing on it. Thinner and bluesier. Even a fierce little drum solo in it, which doesn't really happen on many records. I'm not as crazy about Buffalo Gal. I like his voice on I Don't Want to Forget How to Jive, but it's not the kind of song I want here. Sarah is lovely. I think the piano is a really nice touch and something that I wish they kind of did a little more, even as they went into their really good meat and potatoes, hard rock kind of era. They still were always able to put in these nice little ballads and love songs and remembrance pieces. Could have maybe used some little more piano flushed in. But I'm not sure how much else really sticks out for me. I think the problem with me is, even though the edges are nicely soft and it still has kind of that folky vibe on it, still not quite as unleashed for me. I need Thin Lizzy to be unleashed. I need drums rumbling and tumbling and guitars going like this and Phil really screeching out. So, you know, it's decent. It's a stronger 2.5 than Thunder and Lightning for me, but it's not quite 3 stars. Not something I really want to go back to. Number 10, Shades of a Blue Orphanage.
Right, my number 10 is Thunder and Lightning. Like you guys both said, John Sykes comes in, but I believe most of the record was already written when he joined. They take things even heavier on this one. Phil almost sounds like Lemmy on the title track. His voice is really rough. He doesn't sound good at all. He also sounds really weak on Baby Please Don't Go. His voice sounds totally fried on This Is the One. So a lot of kind of shoddy singing on this one. I think the production is okay for what they're going for. They're kind of really nailing that metal sound of the time, the new wave of British heavy metal type of thing that they're going for. Not really what I like or what I want from Thin Lizzy. Basically, like I said on Chinatown, it still sounded like Thin Lizzy. Not as good, but you could still tell it was them. Here it sounds like a totally different band. They're just like trying to fit in with the metal of the early 80s. Got to hand it to Sykes, though. I think he sounds great. He's tearing it up, shredding up a storm. If you like metal, especially if you like new wave of British heavy metal type of stuff, give it a shot. I don't think it's terrible by any means, but it's just not really to my taste. And, you know, like I said, I don't think Phil sounds that great on it vocally. So 2.5 stars again for me.
All right, here's where it's going to get controversial. I don't think Cramser is going to follow me here. It's not Jailbreak. I'm not going crazy, but this one just does not work for me at all. I don't know who to blame. Perhaps Gary Moore. That's right. I'm going Black Rose, rock legend here. I don't know about this one. I wanted to like it. Like, I like Gary Moore. He's a very good guitarist, but I don't know, it just doesn't work for me. This combination of Phil and like this like very metal sounding guitar. Like, it's very unfolky. It's very sort of, it's not like that unison guitar playing where it's like sparser and like just coming in sometimes when it's needed. This one, like Gary Moore's guitar just takes over the entire album. And none of them are very catchy to me. Like these riffs and these songs, absolutely nothing stuck with me. I like the drum sound on this, and this is another Tony Visconti production. So drums sound great. The bass is a little louder, but the guitar just still like, it's just like shrieking and like shredding in the background of all these songs. And I just don't think the songwriting is up to par. It just feels like wankery to me. Like My Sarah has like this sort of Queen sound to it. S&M, don't really like that one. I Got to Give It Up has cool bass work, but it's just not catchy. And really the only thing that saves it at all for me is Black Rose, A Rock Legend at the end, when they're kind of doing the traditional stuff. And it sounds pretty cool, but of course they didn't write anything. They just arranged traditional songs into kind of this metal thing. So I don't know, maybe I'm missing something here, but this one just does nothing for me. I know it's highly regarded, I guess, by, again, Martin Popoff. So I don't know. There's another 10 out of 10 from him. So I was expecting a little bit more out of Gary Moore, and Phil here. It just doesn't scratch my itch.
Okay, my number 9 is Nightlife, and I've got it at 2.5 stars. This is really the only album of this era that doesn't quite do it for me. After this, I'm going up to 3 stars. No, I'm not. But that's later. Number 9, Nightlife. I think it's great when it starts. She Knows is awesome. I really love that song. It's bringing this like brighter, chimier, lighter sound than Vagabond had. Very good, warm 70s radio fare here. I think the radio community in the 70s slighted Thin Lizzy a little bit. I think they could have way more songs in rotation than pretty much just Jailbreak and, Boys Are Back in Town. Those are really the only ones I ever remember hearing up. Maybe Cowboy Song once in a while. And I think Nightlife song is kind of cool, a bit too easy breezy for me. I think the playing on this is very nice. You get those ELO strings on there. It's Only Money is okay. It's a bit bland, even though it picks up a good bit. It sounds exactly like something else, and I can't put my finger on it. So if anyone in the comments knows, please let me know, because it's eating away at me. But much like Orphanage, I want them unleashed a little bit more. Like songs like Still in Love with You are fine, but not what I want. I mean, the solos and the guitar work on this album are great. But as a whole, I don't think it has the right balance of just like rough and tumbling rockers or the really good refined like folk ballads. Showdown bores me a bit. Sounds like a Steely Dan wannabe at times. It's like the rock songs are like undercalculated. It's just like jamming and noodling sessions, and the softer songs don't have enough for me. So like my exact like adoration for Thin Lizzy is like somewhere right in between. Like everything's like really close for it to being a good album for me. But you get it right off the bat with She Knows. I love that song. I do like Sha La La La. Very refreshing blast of energy. Comes oddly late in the album. I think that's another problem with it. Really feel very sedated listening to this album, and I want my blood boiling a little bit more with my Thin Lizzy. Yeah, just a bit flat, a little uninspired. 2.5 stars for Nightlife, number 9.
All right, Joe, I am with you. Black Rose at number 9, A Rock Legend. I cannot believe how high this ranks on so many Thin Lizzy lists. It blows my mind. To me, it is a clear step down from the run of greatness that they were on. Tony Visconti's back. He produced Bad Reputation with them. I think that record sounds fantastic. This one, frankly, sounds like ass. I think this is a horrible sounding record. I do not know what happened to it. The drums sound terrible. The whole thing is just way too loud. Things are like distorting and like clipping. It's like, what is going on? This record sounds so bad. The one good thing I'll say about it, unlike Joe, I do think the hooks are really good. I think there's a lot of really good choruses on this record. I think it's kind of poppy and catchy. But to me, the songs sound more like an 80s pop rock band that could have been a number of other bands other than Thin Lizzy. It's lost a lot of the Thin Lizzy charm. I don't know that Gary Moore gels quite as well as Robertson did, or even, I don't know, Snowy White at times even may have been a better fit. So I don't know. I think there's some good songs here, but it does not sound good. Phil's voice also, I think, sounds kind of thin and weak on this record. Maybe it's just that everything else is so loud around him. I don't know. It's just a bit confusing to me, and I'm blown away by the acclaim that it gets. I don't really understand it.
I thought it was my headphones like shorting out on those moments where it like clips out. It's like, oh, my headphones must be going. I better buy a new pair. Apparently not. Apparently it's just Black Rose. Number 8, another slightly, I don't know. I have no idea how people actually view these albums at all. Because they kind of got ignored in the US. Krams is right. I mean, other than Boys Are Back in Town and Jailbreak, I don't think I'd ever heard any of these other songs on the radio. My number 8, though, is going to be Fighting. And I don't know. I don't like this one after Nightlife. I thought they were doing some cool stuff on there. More of that R&B, like some funk coming in. And then this one's like, you get that twin guitar attack. Like this is like dialed in now. Like this is the Jailbreak sound. This is the Bad Reputation sound. But I don't know. None of these songs really stuck with me. I don't know how I feel about a Bob Seger cover right off the bat with Rosalie. It's a good song, but I don't know. I don't really want to hear that from Thin Lizzy. I think the guitar work is a little average. Like I know it sounds cool because like they're in unison now, but like the riffs and stuff that they're playing are a little rudimentary and uninteresting. Like you don't have that kind of like extra elements of the horns and like the acoustic guitar as much coming in. There's not much variety. It's pretty much just like all hard rock right down the line. And I don't know, songs just did not stick with me. I didn't consider any of them for my top 10 list. And I think it pretty much falls apart completely on the back half. I don't remember anything about King's Vengeance, Spirit Slips Away, Silver Dollar, Freedom Song, Ballad of a Hard Man. Nothing interesting there. 3 stars.
Right. My number 8, Chinatown. Tough one to place because I think there's actually some very interesting ideas that they implement on this album, but it doesn't really come together. And yeah, I think it's kind of like Jason was saying, pretty clear that Phil's starting to slip a little bit here. To me, this is maybe their worst sounding album. The bass and the drums sound really synthetic here for some reason, almost like it's like a drum machine. It's very weird. I don't think their songwriting is really refined here, but it's Thin Lizzy, so there's still some awesome guitar work, especially on the title track. Chinatown is really ferocious and awesome, but most of the songs are quite bland here and kind of hit and miss. Like none of them are that high, and then you'll get a dud, and then there's like, okay, this one's actually pretty decent, and then there's another dud. Killer on the Loose is good, but then like Having a Good Time doesn't do much for me. I think, didn't I miss the mark? Hey You is okay. Overall, just not quite their best stuff. It's just like a bit of a troubled and messy attempt at a bit more like experimental kind of pop metal for them. The sound just seems a bit lost, but I think there's still some decent playing on it, which kind of saves it. So 2.5 stars. My last 2.5. Number 8, Chinatown.
All right. So I said I really enjoyed Thin Lizzy Week. So that's it for the negativity for me. I'm going up to 3.5 stars. Good records from here on out. And starting off with Thin Lizzy, the debut from 1971, produced by Scott English, who wrote a song called Brandy, but not Brandy, You're a Fine Girl. Brandy that had its name changed to Mandy when Barry Manilow covered it. I like this record. It's a lot more mellow. It's even kind of folky, bluesy, kind of cool. I love the track Honesty is No Excuse. I think that's a great song. Cass McCombs actually does a great cover of it on one of his records. You know, for a hard rock band, I think Lynott's writing always seemed sharper than most. And I think here you can really see why. It's very clear that he's really interested in things like folklore and mythology and storytelling. You can hear that sort of thing on the track. Ire, Look What the Wind Just Blew In is really cool. Phil's voice sounds great on it. It has a great Eric Bell guitar solo. Saga of the Aging Orphan, I think, is a really pretty acoustic tune. I think it's a really charming record. Phil's voice and songwriting on it are really compelling. I think it's obvious, though, that like there's tons of room for growth and they could go on to many different things. But I enjoy the rough edges to this. I think it's a nice debut. Enjoyed it a lot. 3.5 stars.
All right, yeah, I'm two leaving the negativity. One album later than Jason, but I am gonna go with 3.5 stars for my number 7. I got Vagabonds of the Western World. Really great stuff on here, and some stuff that kind of annoys me. Really great. Mama Nature Said, love the slide guitar. It's a little dancey. Lynott's vocals, so good on that track. It's like, I don't know, Hendrix meets Rod Stewart or something. He just sounds killer, so unique, interesting. And then the Hero and the Madman comes along and kind of ruins my whole buzz that I got from Mama Nature Said. That talking, like it bugs me just because there's like this little story part in there, and the story's kind of annoying. And like the dude speaking, I don't even know who it is. Like, is it Phil, like disguising his voice? Like, I don't know who they got. Kid Jensen, apparently. All right. He was a Canadian-born DJ, from what I'm looking at right now on Wikipedia. Really hate when he comes in. It just sounds so cheesy and kind of lame. Like, why couldn't Phil just do it? Like, it'd be kind of cool probably if he had done the talking parts. So that kind of kills it for me. Get It Back, though, a little bit of slow blues. I think the rocker is real good. And the second half's fine. Vagabond of the Western World title track's good. Little Grown Bloom's fine. These are all decent songs, but after Mama Nature Said, I don't think anything's going to make my top 10 list. The rocker would probably be the only other one. And it just, I don't know, they don't seem to quite know where they want to go with this. I don't know, it's kind of like teetering on the edge of hard rock with a little bit of the folk element still in, but I don't know if Eric Bell's really the guy to do the hard rock stuff. So it's kind of getting out of his comfort zone. You don't have the cool unison guitars yet, so I don't know, they're struggling. They don't know what they want to do here. So sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But it's interesting. It's probably more interesting than Goods, but I still have it at 3.5 stars.
Yeah, good records for me. Here on out, this is the one that I will have lower than I think general consensus. And I'm going to imagine both of you have this very high for reasons I'm about to get into. Got Bad Reputation, 3 stars. Of course, yes, this is their cheesiest, dorkiest 70s weird space sounding album, of course. And Jason loves all the weird kind of strange 70s stuff. Guitars are a little bit puny here compared to the other albums. Doesn't have quite the hard rock flair. The songs are all pretty good. There's also kind of like a little bit of glam posing here. It's not like the cool, well-written, hard-nosed folk rockers that are like Opium Trail. Bit kind of lame, and I don't think Phil's really singing to his full potential here. They're almost doing like a little bit of prog metal style on this. Southbound is a bit soft to me. I've never really liked Dancing in the Moonlight. I do really dig Killer Without a Cause. I think that's really strong. I'm also not crazy about the sound. It's like not as strong or bright as their other stuff. I don't know. I think Downtown Sundown is really good. But the main problem I have with this is this like cheesy kind of pseudo fake spirituality to it, and all this kind of like God and Christian nuance to it and heaven, and it just doesn't really come out as sincere or real. This is probably going to be in Jason's top 3 because he's like a real closeted Jesus freak, as we saw with the Dylan rankings. No one on earth likes Dylan's Christian phase as much as Jason, so this makes sense. I still think it's a good record. I only have it at 3. It's close to 3.5. There's something just missing for me here, but I do think it's good. Bad Reputation, number 7.
All right. Oh, I'm lining up with Joe again. Vagabonds of the Western World is my number 7. Still have Eric Bell on guitar, Nick Tauber producing again. Same thing you had on the previous record, Shades of a Blue Orphanage. But even though it's still those guys, I think this is a much better effort. You know, even without the twin guitars yet, I think this feels like a little bit like the beginning of classic Lizzy. It was interesting listening to all of these chronologically because they really take like incremental steps with every record at the beginning towards that kind of signature sound that you think of. This record has the attitude, it's got the swagger, Lynott's voice in full form, I think. The production is a lot better than it was on the previous record. Everything's a bit more balanced. It doesn't have that really tiny drum sound that the previous record has. The rocker, I think, is a really badass tune. Great drumming on it. I love when he says, "Got my sickle outside, want to ride." I think that's really cool. And then Vagabonds, the title track, has that Irish folklore type of storytelling, but instead of delivering it as a folk song, it's like a really great hard rock song with a lot of muscle behind it. And I think that's kind of like a real staple of Thin Lizzy, just like folk songs that are delivered as hard rock songs. Gonna Creep Up on You has a real funky groove, and that funky R&B feel ends up being another major part of their sound. It closes with a song for While I'm Away, which I think is really cool. Harkens back to the debut record a little bit. I think it's a really lovely tune, acoustic guitar, big orchestral arrangement on it. I think his vocals on it sound great. Things starting to fall into place a bit on this record. I think they finally sort of seem like they have a clear identity on this record. 3.5 stars.
I'm number 6. I guess I like this one more than most. I got Chinatown here. Really like We Will Be Strong. I think they're acclimating to the 80s pretty well. It definitely has like a little more like pop metal sound to it. And unlike on Renegade, I think Snowy White's guitar work, much stronger. I don't, for whatever reason, no idea. Maybe it's just Gorham writing it and Snowy's, doing the unison Dublin thing, but whatever reason, the guitars sound much better on Chinatown to me than they do later. And I just think it's catchy. A lot of these songs I thought were like pretty good poppy, hard rock. I think Phil sounds much better than he does on Renegade. I think it sounds better than he does on Black Rose. Chinatown, really strong guitar part. Killer on the Loose, again, strong guitars. Having Good Times, pretty good, catchy. And I mean, I don't think there's anything like sublime. There's nothing here that changes the world or.
I think the title track is sensational.
Title track is great. I think We Will Be Strong is great. It's not quite up to like their glory days, I don't think, but I think it's a fine record. I'd never heard of this one at all. Didn't know it existed. So 3.5 stars. It's good. I like it.
My number 6 is Thin Lizzy, the debut. Good call by Jason. It is a little rough around the edges, but in like this charming kind of way because they're so different, because they are Irish folk songs turned up with killer electric guitars, and the guitar sounds really cool on these first couple albums. Totally different when they start the twin attack later, but I love the guitar flourishes, and Honesty Is No Excuse. Diddy Levine is this really awesome section when it picks up. And they kind of on this album create these really cool like jam sessions in the songs, mixed with this hard rock paint job and everything. It's very cool. There's like this really cool bass and twisting psych guitar on Ray Gun. He might be over singing a little bit here, but like it's kind of what you want for the debut. He will refine it a little bit later, but he sounds great. I don't think the album sounds that great, either with the mixing or the actual recording. It's a little bit weak. Nothing quite packs the punch that it needs to, but it's still really good. Wind That Just Blew In is fun and a bit raucous. Yeah, the guitar work on Ire is really good. Saga of the Aging Orphan is really nice and breaks things up well. Remember is really good. It's just a really good, cool, interesting rock record with unique perspective and better lyrics, like Jason said, than most hard rock songs. So 3.5 for the debut, number 6, Thin Lizzy.
All right. So I am not surprised that I have this higher than either of you, but I didn't think you would both have it last. I've got Renegade at number 6. they add Darren Morton as a full member on this one. He played a little bit on Chinatown, but he's a full member of the band here on keys and synth. I don't know, like when I got to Black Rose, that was basically for me like the beginning of the end, and I was not that interested except for this record. This record just like stood out so much to me. I think it's significantly better sounding than the two previous records. Musically, it's not like exactly what I really want from Lizzy. I think it's trying to align with the British metal still, but I think for what it is, it's way more successful than Chinatown or Thunder and Lightning. I think Phil sounds a little bit reinvigorated on this. I think he's putting way more personality into the performances than he did on Chinatown. The Pressure Will Blow and Hollywood, I think, are really good poppy hard rock songs. No One Told Him To is super catchy. I think Snowy White has some blistering solos on this record too that don't really fit the old Lizzy mold, but they work for what they're going for. Fats is this really weird strutting jazz thing, but I think it's a nice reminder of their versatility. Mexican Blood I thought was really good. I'm shocked at how much I like this record. I did not expect to. I think it sounds good. I think the songs are not the best Thin Lizzy songs by any means. Nothing on this record made my top 10, but I think it's pretty consistent and an enjoyable, fun listen. And I am up to 4 stars on Renegade.
It's consistent, all right, but not in a it's not in a good way.
Are we trying to get Pop Off on our show? Is that why you're giving that 4 stars? Because he's the only person who likes it more than you.
I'm not the one saying Pop Off in every review.
I know, but it's just funny. I'm looking at his reviews, and on Wikipedia, like that's the only person they cite because apparently it's the only person who has a rooting interest in Thin Lizzy. That, I mean, he's just given everything 10 out of 10. So who knows? I don't get it. I don't understand your love for Renegade. My number 5, going back to the debut for this one. This is just a cool album. Totally unique in the way it fuses, I don't know if it's hard rock quite yet. I mean, it's close. With like that Irish folk sound, a lot of like different instrumentation. You got like Mellotron on here, a lot of acoustic guitars. Definitely have like that Van Morrison influence. And some people say like compared like him and early Springsteen together. And I think they both just sort of played off like Van Morrison a little bit. But I think the lyrics on this and the songwriting definitely, I don't want to say like it gets worse in every album, but like he starts off so strong with like that folkiness and his wordplay and everything, just really good right off the bat. And sometimes I feel like he loses that a little bit to like the heavy guitars later on, because I really do like the interesting sound. Honestly, There's No Excuse is fantastic. Ray Gun, really cool, like groovy sound. Lots of like wah guitar in one channel, and like some heavy 60s style guitar in the other from Bell. On Saga of the Aging Orphan, Lynott's really like channeling the folk rockness of it. He's got like this cool vibrato. Kind of reminds me of like Gene Clark or something. I got to bring him up anytime I even get a hint of Gene mentioning it. So this is just like a really cool, interesting, very sort of unique album. Did not, I guess I didn't know about this side of the band. Like I just kind of thought they just came out of the womb with like twin guitars and just, Jailbreak was like the first thing they ever did. So it was cool to kind of go back and hear like how they started and the different sound and the way they progressed to that twin guitar sound, because this is just not that at all. And it's cool. I don't know if it's I got a 3.5 stars. I could be convinced maybe to put it to 4, but I think the Friendly Ranger at Clontarf Castle kind of not a great start. I was kind of dreading. As soon as I heard that, I was like, is this really what they're going to do? Fortunately, once that's over, it gets much better.
I kind of get what you're saying. I don't think his lyrics get worse as time goes on, but they're not the emphasis of his lyrics isn't the same. He really kind of whittles it down and streamlines it and gets more concise with it. He's not flowering it up like he does here. And I kind of get the Springsteen thing too. He's kind of doing like Americana or heartland rock style lyrics for Ireland, like Irish Kana, whatever you want to call it. My number 5, and for these 5 that I've got at the top, it looks like we're going to share at least 4 out of the top 5 here. And to be honest, like I'm cool with anyone's top 5 being the winner, like of these 5, because they're all really strong. My number 5, I've got Johnny the Fox. 4 stars we're up to now. This is a great rock record, and I will talk about it more, but quite simply, that's kind of the beauty of it. It's rock and roll. End of story. It's awesome. It's just, you know, thwarting bass, tumbling drums, blistering guitar coming at you. It's great guitar, hard rock. Probably I have it at number 5 because it doesn't have quite the variety or highs as some of the other records, but it's still really good, really hard-nosed. It starts off so strong with Johnny, Rocky, and Borderline. Just really good. Like, I love these albums because you're constantly just like in your body listening to these. Your foot's tapping, your head's banging, you're going here. The guitar attack on Don't Believe a Word is great. The solo in that song is ridiculous. Fool's Gold is really, really good. It's got a great tail too. And then he does this really cool thing. It might be my favorite 5 seconds of any of the guitar work in this whole discography is before he goes into the solo, he's doing like these little pinched arpeggio runs, and then he just takes off with the solo. It just sounds so cool. Old Flame is just like the perfect touch on this album. It's like this beautiful little kind of romantic ballad of remembrance. I think it's great. I do think Sweet Marie is a little bit too docile for this record, maybe the weakest track on it. So not the big, huge highlights for me. Like I said, I think they deserved more radio play than they did. And really, other than Old Flame, don't know how much like really huge radio hits you could steal off here. But if you like hard rock, that's kind of the brilliance too, is they know they're a hard rock band. 38 to 44 minutes, every album, couple of ballads, slow it down a little bit for you. Boom. The formula's there. They nail it. Sounds good. 4 stars. Great. Number 5, Johnny the Fox.
All right. My top 5, they are the 5 Gorham Robertson albums, the classic era. At number 5, I'm going with Fighting. Thought of by most people, I think, as the album where they truly found their sound. It's not as dependent on R&B grooves as Nightlife is, and it puts the guitars way more forward, much more emphasis on the guitar playing and the guitar work. The twin guitar harmonizing really takes shape on this record. Like Joe said, opens with a cover of Bob Seger's Rosalie, which I think is a perfect fit for them. It sounds great. I think side 1 in general is excellent. For those who love to live, Suicide, Wild One, Fighting My Way Back, I think those are all awesome songs. They just absolutely rule. But I do agree with Joe a little bit that side 2 is not quite as good. Nothing is memorable. I wouldn't say any of it's really bad, but it's just not as infectious or catchy. And I think Silver Dollar especially doesn't really stack up to the stuff on the first half. And maybe it's a little unfair to judge this record against future releases. But to me, Future song on this record feels like their first crack at a song like Boys Are Back in Town, just not quite as good. A lot of this album, even though I think it's very good, you know, I know that they'll improve upon it later. So to me, a very good record, but not quite like the pinnacle of Thin Lizzy quite yet. 4 stars for me.
All right, my last 4 here, pretty much all the same. Mere like, you know, I'm being like the Russian judge here, the Olympics, just like 0.1 deductions. Oh yeah, not Russian. Oof. I'm being lad. I don't know. Doesn't matter. I'm harsh on this one because of the 2 tracks that everyone knows. I have Jailbreak at number 4, and it's mostly because Boys Are Back in Town and Jailbreak. I don't think they're bad songs by any means. They've never like really done it for me. I know those are like the classic songs people associate with Thin Lizzy, but that's kind of a reason why I was never like really all that eager to get into Thin Lizzy, because I heard those songs. I'm like, oh, if that is that the best they can do, that's fine, but it doesn't, turn me on. I'm not trying to listen to their whole albums if that's the best. So those two tracks are kind of the downfall why we're at number 4 here, because everything else is really great. Angel from the Coast has a really cool, like jittery guitar sound. I think Phil sounds probably the best he ever has or ever will be on this album. He's just in top form. The twin guitar fury on Emerald at the end, where they're just like wailing away, is just sick. Really great stuff. Running Back, Romeo and the Lonely Girl, just tight little rockers. Don't overstay their welcome. Warriors has a great guitar solo. Let Fall is fine. Like, these are all real good, interesting songs, great riffs, great playing, great singing, great drums, good bass. And it's really just, Boys Are Back in Town and Jailbreak are probably like the 2 worst tracks on the whole album. I don't know. Maybe that's sacrilegious to say, but they never did it for me. And that's kind of, why I've never been quite into Thin Lizzy as like Cramser has, but still good. 4 stars, probably 0.1 behind number 3. So it's right there. They're all the same at this point.
My number 4 was my favorite discovery of the week. Knew a couple songs off it, but didn't know the entirety of Vagabonds of the Western World. And I thought this was a really cool album and a very interesting way to go after the debut. Kind of keeping that folklore, but they also kind of really just expand on everything, all of their sound completely. And I also love the bass on it. The bass is really fat on this. I think it sounds great. Love the rhythm section on Hero and the Madman. The drums are so tight and loose and fun all at the same time. It's got kind of like this trippy psychedelic vibe throughout of it, like this cool space cowboy vibe with like the guitar work kind of leading over everything. I like how epic and powerful Slow Blues is at the opening. Then it kind of chills and grooves. Like, they have all these songs have these really cool movements and like momentum shifts and different atmospheres kind of evoked throughout. As much as I like the way the bass sounds on this, I don't think the cymbals on the drums sound good here at all, but they are well played. Drumming in general and the rhythm section in general is quite overlooked with this band. And you get the rocker, which I knew before, which is friggin' awesome. Might have just like the purest cock rock energy of any song of all time. It's literally about just being able to get women because you're a freaking rock star. Like, pretty cool. Solo is nasty on it. Title track is great. Guitar lead has so much feel, and I love when it cuts out with the cowbell. So I think they're really taking a big leap here as players and knowing what they want to be, even though they don't really sound like this ever again. Little Girl in Bloom is awesome and rather sweet and has that really cool like rubbery bass sound on it. Cool as hell. And the guitar in the outro is fantastic. Whiskey in the Jar is great, obviously. Black Boys on the Corner rules. I think there's really cool variety on here. You get Randolph's Tango at the end. It's very close to 4.5 for me, but I've just got it at 4. Maybe with a little bit more time, although given our schedule, not going to happen. Could get up to 4.5. But yeah, this was a pleasant surprise. I loved it. 4 stars, and number 4 for Vagabonds of the Western World.
Sounds like you went into the bonus tracks there.
Did I?
Whiskey in the Jar and Randolph's Tango are not on the record.
Well, okay, my bad. I couldn't stop listening. I couldn't even pick up and be like, is this done? Am I in the deluxe version here? It was awesome. Same score regardless.
My number 4 is Johnny the Fox. Phil, they're starting to build this momentum, at least in the US, with some hits finally with Boys Are Back in Town, Jailbreak, and then Phil gets hepatitis and they got to cancel a bunch of shows. So I don't know how much that was responsible for their lack of, success in the US, if that just like killed their momentum. But on the plus side, you get another record out of it because he goes home and he writes this record. And I think it's a really good one. Much fuller sound, big fat low end on this record, especially the kick drum on this record is huge. Opens with Johnny, which I think is a great rocker, kind of in the vein of Jailbreak, just a really awesome way to open a record. some killer solos on it as well. There's like a little bit of brass on it in the background, which I think is kind of unnecessary. It's really low in the mix and just kind of pointless and doesn't add a whole lot, but just a great rock song. Rocky is really cool too. It's kind of a different sort of riff for Lizzy, built more around the bass. Borderline, kind of their stab at country, with Lynott even putting like on a little bit of like a fake Southern accent on certain lines. Don't Believe a Word is awesome. So good. Criminal that it's only 2 minutes and 17 seconds. It's like the most devastatingly short song ever. Fool's Gold, really cool, weird vocal effect edit at 1:32. Don't know what's going on with that. There's a couple weird little edits on this record. Old Flame, Sweet Marie, I think both bring out the band's softer side really well. This record is a concept record, but it's kind of muddled. I don't really know what the story is going on this one, but songs like Johnny the Fox and Massacre, they kind of do support the idea of there being like this overarching theme. I think it's a little more polished, a little bit of a fuller sound than previous records. Individually, I think the songs are probably less memorable here than they are on Jailbreak. But it just has a really great album feel to it. Boogie Woogie Dance, I think, is the one misstep at the end to close it, but even that still has some killer guitar playing on it. But that's another track that has a really weird edit at like 1:58. I don't know, there's like this blip and I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's just a bad tape cut or something. I don't know. But I think it's great. 4 stars.
All right, number 3 is going to be Nightlife. Really cool, interesting detour with the band. Despite it, having Scott Gorham and Brian Robertson joining the band and Eric Bell leaving, like it's not that twin guitar, like that comes in fighting. This is like R&B, jazz, like funk. Phil kind of exploring more like his Black heritage instead of the Irish stuff, the folky stuff that they had started with. And I think it's a really cool, good album. She Knows has that like first tick of, first tick of like that different sound. Like you get jazz, you get R&B. The guitars are very prominent. They're not doing the unison thing, but they're still, very much in the mix, very much there. Nightlife has some funkiness on the guitars. It's Only Money. Like I hear like Curtis Mayfield sort of influence, especially in just the construction of the songs and the way the kind of guitars are not as prominent. Like they're there and they're doing the stabs and like the kind of horn-like stuff, but they're not just like full-on hard rock. Still in Love with You does sound a little bit like Steely Dan, and that is never a bad thing. Then you get Frankie Carroll, which is really kind of cool piano ballad, totally different than anything they've done. Very haunting, very kind of sad, and just like cool lyrics that really are a different side of Phil's brain, whatever he's working with here. I don't know if it was like a conscious effort to explore a different side of him, but I think it works really well. Think Showdown, Banshee, Philomena, Shalala, not as strong as the first side, but it brings it back with Dear Heart at the end, which is great, with those like soaring strings coming in there. The album has more of that R&B, funk, early 70s, Black music in America type of feel to it. I think it was obviously an intentional move by Lynott to kind of bring that in. I think it works really well. I wish they had done another album like it. They really just shifted completely to that twin guitar attack for fighting, which I don't really like that much. So I don't know. I think it's a really cool, unique album, and 4 stars for me, right near the top. Again, these 4 here at the top for me are so like minuscule between them. But this one started very cool. Nightlife.
Well, my number 3 is Jailbreak. Title track rules. I love Angel from the Coast following it up. We talk a lot about album openers. There's also a really cool nuance to the number 2 spot, especially on a rock and roll effort. And I think this is like the perfect kind of style to go. It's like not quite as intense, but it's a little bit more steady, but still upbeat. perfect. And just the rumble and tumble on this album is so good. Just their version of rock and roll just rules here. You get the pleasantly low key running back. The album's just a really good mix of hard rock and softer kind of folkier side with punch. Warriors is nice and fierce. I love Boys Are Back in Town. I think that's a classic for a reason. The that's a chorus of guitars in your head. It's so catchy. Lyrics are really good on this album. I get the Springsteen kind of vibe on here, like just the blue collar folk tale kind of, realism to it is very cool. I think it's great, very picturesque in that lifestyle, like that Americana or Heartland for, these Irish boys, just good beer drinking music to get you through these tough blue collar jobs and rough times. Fight or Fall is really lovely. Cowboy Song is amazing, one of the coolest ones they've ever done. Great hook on it. And so picturesque and like romantic with its thought, still rocking and full of vigor. And it doesn't get any better than Emerald. Pretty much just badass as hell. Emerald and Cowboy Song, by the way, just missing my top 10 tomorrow. Spoiler there. I think, and those are great songs. I think Thin Lizzy has so many more great classic rock songs than people are aware of. I mean, the radio stations here in the States, at least, really screwed them over. They could have had so many more tunes on here. Really a bloody shame, but 4.5 stars for Jailbreak, my number 3.
All right, my number 3 is Nightlife. The beginning of the Gorham Robertson era, much better sounding record than even Vagabonds. I think they've, by this point, graduated to a better producer, probably got a bigger budget at this point as well, and they benefit greatly, I think, from having a second guitarist. This record, like you have both pointed out, really accentuates their R&B leanings more than any other record of theirs, I think, which is really cool. I really like that side of their sound. And they carry that through other records, but it's not as prominent, or it's kind of like mixed in with other stuff. But here it's really at the forefront. She Knows, really smooth pop rock tune to open things up is great. Nightlife, really cool jazzy R&B feel, kind of borrows the chorus from Willie Nelson's Nightlife, although I don't think he's credited. And when they do turn it up on It's Only Money, it's just really built on like this nasty, almost funk groove, really cool. They have a really unique sound on this record, and I think it's awesome. Still in Love with You, so killer. I love it. Very soulful. Phil shares lead vocals with Frankie Miller on that one, who to me sounds a little bit like James Dewar from Robin Trower's band, and both of them sound so good on that song. Plus you get Gary Moore guesting on lead guitar, playing those solos, and they are just fantastic. Showdown, I think, is really cool. A song that you could like roam the streets to looking for a fight, but also it's kind of like pretty and sexy at the same time. So it does both things really well. I think on this record, they absolutely chose the wrong singles. I think She Knows and Still in Love with You should be radio staples, and they just went with the wrong songs. I forget, I looked. I think Philomena was the lead single. I'm not sure. It's just not the right pick, but I think this record does taper off a little near the end. Joe's right about that. The last couple songs aren't as strong, but I think it's a really cool record. I like it a lot. It's 4 stars, but it's close to 4.5.
Number 2, I'm cruising here at 4 stars. They're close to 4.5 for me. I just haven't listened enough, I don't think, because I really hadn't heard these albums much until this week. Just like sort of, I know I've listened to them, but I don't know, they didn't catch my ear the first time years ago. But I'm getting more of it now. Number 2 is going to be Bad Reputation. I don't know what the hell Cramser's talking about, because this album kicks booty. Such a hard rock, just twin guitar, fury all over this bad boy. Bad Reputation, so heavy. Opium Trails, another one. It's just like this ridiculous, prominent guitar. Maybe a little less fun than Jailbreak. A little more hard rock. And even though like Brian Robertson is now like not a full-time member, the guitar on this, like, it's even more prominent. So I don't know there was a lot of infighting between him and Phil, but whatever, it doesn't matter. It doesn't affect the sound at all. You would never know, like he wasn't like a full-time member. It doesn't come into play at all. His guitar is excellent. Tony Visconti, production, sounds fuller, thicker. Killer Without a Cause, great catchy song. Love the little break with the acoustic and the wah guitar going on. The reason this isn't my number one kind of is Dancing in the Moonlight. It's Caught Me in Its Spotlight. I never liked that song, and I know that's like one of their bigger hits. I think Downtown Sundown, much better, softer ballad. Really like Phil's bass work on there, like pulsating and cool sounding. The solo from Robertson on That Woman's Gonna Break Your Heart, magnificent. And you kind of have like that cowboy feel still on this one a little bit, like you get that acoustic guitar going. Same that you'd get with like Angel from the Coast and a cowboy song from Jailbreak. Here, like you get that like a Wild West almost sounding, like they're just like roaming free, rocking the hell out of the Wild Wild West or whatever. And Dear Lord, another great song, great way to end the album. So yeah, I mean, other than Dancing in the Moonlight, I think everything else is really great. But again, the single, like Dancing in the Moonlight, that's their big single from this, just does absolutely nothing for me at all. I think it's kind of cheesy, not too catchy, a little forced. Everything else is great though. Still 4 stars. Not quite a 4.5. Not quite.
Yeah, I don't know why that one doesn't click with me as much. I'm shocked you guys don't like Black Rose, which I'm still not talking about. My number 2 is Fighting, which just edges out Jailbreak because I think there's just better songs on it. And you're like, what? Jailbreak's got cowboy song and this and that. Yeah, it sure does, dude. But it doesn't have Rosalie, which I'm with Jason. I think forgot it was a cover. One of the best covers I've ever heard in my life. I think it's perfect this way. Comes out swinging. It's nice and meaty and melodic. It's a great song to begin with. Hopefully we'll do a Seeger week soon. And yeah, the twin guitar tack here has arrived, and it is so, so good. You can take your Bostons and do whatever you want with it. This is the more premier, crystal clear guitar rock sound for me. I'll take this over Boston any day of the week. It sounds so good. The groove and the lead in For Those Who Love to Live is so unreal. It's so good. Suicide is great. Wonderful playing. I think I scoffed when you guys said the second half kind of drew it down. And I do agree the first half is better, but only by a little bit. Fighting My Way Back is great. Just good hard rock bliss. Wild One is just fantastic. I think it's his best vocal performance. And, he's letting the song breathe and coming in at the perfect time. He's just really mesmerizing the way he brings out the emotion in that. And I like stuff on the second half too. I think King's Vengeance is really cool. Spirit Slips Away is really nice and kind of mellow and swaying. Almost has like this Fleetwood Mac vibe to it. Yeah, it's great hard nose rock and roll. And I think on the strength of For Those Who Love to Live and Rosalie and Wild One being my 3 favorites on it, probably. I like those 3 more than my 3 favorites on Jailbreak, and then everything else kind of evens out. They're very close, very similar albums, and Fighting, I just got a little bit more. I think Phil has a little bit better singing moments on it, and the highlights are a little bit better. Still not quite at 5 stars, though, for me. 4.5. I don't want to sound like a hard rock sellout, but it is hard for me to give 5 stars to kind of just simple hard rock albums because I like a little bit more creativity, which, someone like Zeppelin or Sabbath will bring, which is why Thin Lizzy for me isn't quite like on that hard rock pedestal for me that other bands are, but it's still awesome. Nothing wrong with a 4.5. That is really great.
So nobody going Jailbreak number 1. I've got Jailbreak at number 2. And I was interested reading a little bit about this record. to see that it appears that neither Gorham or Robertson really liked this record that much. And I don't know when those opinions were expressed. Maybe that's changed over time. I don't know. Maybe that was just, after fresh off the experience of recording it or something. But they've both said that it felt rushed and it was rigid and they didn't like their guitar tones. And honestly, aside from the guitar tones, which I think are awesome, I can hear it a little bit. I don't, as good as I think Jailbreak is, I think it could actually be better, especially in terms of the production. However, I think the songs here are pretty stellar, super memorable, super varied. There's a ton of variety on this record. You've got rock stuff like Boys Are Back in Town, heavier stuff like Jailbreak and Emerald, softer stuff like Fight or Fall, poppier stuff like Running Back. I mean, they just do it all on here, and they do it all at a very high level. More so than the prior two records, Gorham and Robertson seem just 100% in sync. This is the sound that they had been working up to. It's not totally new, but they're just like really gelling at this point. And their parts are just really good and memorable. And, the guitar lines, like you said, in regards to Boys Are Back in Town, that's like a chorus of guitar. And that's just how memorable so many of the guitar lines on this record are, just as memorable as anything that Phil is singing. And, I think when you think of Thin Lizzy, obviously you think of the lead harmonies and stuff that they do. But I think there's also a ton of examples on this record of them doing really cool rhythm stuff too, just when they're like chugging through a verse and the way they're just doing it slightly differently, or one is like accenting things a little differently than the other. Just super, super cool. They rarely, if ever, just like completely double up on what they're playing. I think the exception to that is the title track with just that main riff. But you can really hear like in the rhythms of the Cowboy song when they're just like kind of chugging through the verses, just they're doing such cool stuff. And I think on this record, finally, all of their influences have melded into their own thing and given them a really clear identity of their own. It doesn't have you can't say like you can about Nightlife that it's like the R&B record or it's this or that. Like it's just Thin Lizzy at this point, and it's all become one thing. And it's great. It's just, I think, very close, if not their best batch of songs they ever wrote. So 4.5 stars for me.
All right, my winner, John Fox, the only one left. Still 4 stars for me. I like Thin Lizzy. I don't love Thin Lizzy, and they're not anywhere near my A tier of 70s hard rock bands. There's something about them a little, I don't know, they just don't quite got the chops in comparison. Like there's all these great 70s hard rock bands that I'd rather listen to. Like I'm just never really going to come back to any of this stuff. I think Nightlife actually might be the one that is most interesting to me because it has a different sound. Not that there's anything wrong with Johnny the Fox. I think it's a fine album, very consistent. I like how it's kind of a little bit thematically tied together. I think the lyrics and the overall feel, a little more diversity in it. The lyrics a little bit more interesting than on Jailbreak. Even though, I mean, I don't know if the theme really holds up throughout. Like it's not really a story. Got a lot of Johnnies popping up though. Johnny, and then Johnny the Fox meets Jimmy the Weed. But it's just a cool album. Like they got some funkiness on Johnny. A little synth combo with the guitar in there. Some horns are popping in a little bit, like a touch of that Nightlife R&B. And I think the riffs are a little bit better than on Fighting or Jailbreak, as far as like just being more interesting, catchier. I like Jailbreak, but the title track, that riff kind of just bores me a little bit. I think it's a little more interesting here. Got that lonesome cowboy Wild West feel to Borderline. Don't Believe a Word is perhaps the most like lean, excellent, tightest compact rock song of the entire 1970s. The fact that it is only 2 minutes and 18 seconds sucks. Like they do the verse, they get right into that incredibly cool guitar solo, and then it's like chorus overdone. It's like I want 3 more of those just back to back. Just, I'm going to rewind this, pretend like it's one song, because it rules. It is such a good song. They didn't release that as the first single. It should have been. They released In America, Johnny the Fox Meets Jimmy the Weed as the first single, which makes no sense at all. Like, that is not a single. Don't Believe a Word. Now that's a single. Old Flame is great. That slower kind of lovelorn ballad. The chicken picked guitar is really cool. And cool guitar solo at the end. Nice unison playing. Sweet Marie, another great one. Kind of starts out slow and plain, and you don't know where it's going to go, but then the string arrangement comes in, ends the track on a nice, pretty note. Boogie Woogie Dance is fine. I think they should have ended with Sweet Marie, though. That would have been a much better closer. I hate those anything with a dance like in the title in these rock albums, like always kind of concerns me because they're usually not great. It's usually like some kind of weird gimmick. But a good album, 4 stars, close to 4.5 again. But I don't know, Thin Lizzy, good band, but doesn't quite reach me the way it has reached you two and reached many people.
We need to get the Joe's the Rocker, the group moniker, out of here because it's just not true. The more time goes on. Now,
I'm the R&B and funk guy. That's fine. You can have the rock. You can have the rock, whatever.
Well, speaking of rock, my winner is Black Rose, which I could kind of see Jason not liking, but I'm kind of surprised Joe had it so low because it has more of like a metallic sound to it. It's from 1979. I've got it at 4.5 stars, 79, one of those years in the 70s that just keeps on giving. It's so loaded. The reason I think this is my favorite is I think it's got the most style, the most dynamic, the most variety, and it keeps that Thin Lizzy kind of attitude about rock music and approach. Somehow does it a little bit like poppier, cooler, and just with more style. It's just so interesting to me. They're still doing these hard rockers, but they're just twisting it a little bit. It's really cool. You can do anything you want is a great opener. It's got that like punk thunder drums to it. Really good pumping rock. A little bit back to basics at time on this album, which I really like. I think Toughest Street Around is sick. I think it's got a really catchy sing-along quality, and good God, that solo. Like, this could have been like a Boys Are Back in Town style radio hit to me. I don't know why it's not. I love S&M. I think it's really weird and funky and dirty and sloppy and grimy. So cool. Cool mix of like street punk with like their hard rock punch. Even like touches of new wave on this album a little bit with like the backing vocals and Waiting for an Alibi. Like, you can hear the Police a little bit there. It's really interesting. My Sarah is so weird and cool sounding. It's such a great song, and that guitar sound is really cool. Really imaginative atmosphere and style on it. With Love, breathes really well. It's really a really good nuanced song with a great bass line and solo. Closing track is really cool and out there and just a tour de force. So it's got a little bit of everything for me, which I really like. I think it's their most impressive, and that's the reason why it shows up on a lot of people's top, top rankings here for Thin Lizzy. I'm not crazy. I'm not the outlier here. But yeah, I think it's just a phenomenal, like maybe their most artistic record, I would probably say, while still maintaining their identity as a hard rock group, which is why I think it's really impressive, especially given how they were going. It was kind of hard for them to do, and they pulled it off here. Great. I think it's a tremendous record. I love it. 4.5 stars. Black Rose, rock legend.
All right, my number one is Bad Reputation, 1977, Tony Visconti. Brian Robertson hurt his hand in a brawl, couldn't play guitar. Plus, he was fighting with Phil a bunch, I guess. So Phil was like trying to keep him off the record, just had Gorham record everything, but Gorham saved Robertson a couple little showcase solos where he comes in. And he did record those solos, and he did finish the following tour with it before he was out of the band. But, not putting him on the cover, that is cold. Just got the 3 of them on the cover. You're not even going to like keep up appearances. What are you doing? Also, there's a hilarious story about that. Jim Fitzpatrick, who does all the awesome like illustrations on their covers, like Vagabonds. Such a great cover. He was supposed to do an illustration for this. And you read this, Joe? Phil went to approve the artwork. He was supposed to fly to Madison, Connecticut, and flew to Madison, Wisconsin by mistake. So they had to rush a different cover, and they used that photograph. I don't know if that's true, but I love that story. I think that's hilarious. I think it's the most well-produced Lizzy record. I think it sounds great. The bass on it sounds fantastic. Phil's voice sounds really great. Nothing really super fancy going on in the production. Just everything sits in the right place. Sounds really good. I love the vocal harmonies on Southbound, especially the low harmonies that, you know, Phil is singing along with himself, overdubbing. Sounds really great. I love the multi-track vocals on Opium Trail. Dancing in the Moonlight's fantastic. Made my song of the year list in 77. I don't know what you guys are talking about. I love that song. I think it's awesome. When the acoustics come in on Killer Without a Cause, such a cool, unexpected moment. It's like this really heavy hard rock song, and just out of nowhere you get this acoustic guitar and harmonica. It probably doesn't have an earworm on the record as strong as Boys Are Back in Town or Jailbreak or anything like that. I just think that the collection of songs is really, really strong, neck and neck as far as like complete, consistent records. I just like the sound of this one a little more. I think it's a little slicker, a little cleaner, but without losing like the muscle. It's not their attempt at a pop record or anything like that. It still has the Lizzy sound. It's just really nice. Love it. 4.5. Not getting to 5.
Yeah. Overall, I think they're a great rock band, and I love them, even though I don't have a 5-star album. But it's tough for me, like, because it's the 70s. Like Joe's right. Like, I'm putting them up. Like, I don't like them more than Sabbath. I don't like them more than Zeppelin. I don't like them more than Deep Purple. I don't think more than Aerosmith. Like, I don't know what tier they're like on. And I don't know if that means I think they're underrated or if they're appropriately rated. They just don't get the appreciation they deserve. Like I said, I still think the radio stations really slighted them, but I don't know. It's tough. There is a certain level of like creativity that I really pine for that they just don't quite have. And I'm not even saying that they're a basic, boring hard rock band. They're not. They're very interesting in that regard. So I don't know. My ideas are kind of somewhere in there. It's tough.
I think they're great. And I would put them neck and neck. Maybe I might put them ahead of Aerosmith. I like Thin Lizzy a lot. I think they're really good.
I definitely have them ahead of AC/DC for the other hard rock bands that we've done.
I don't think they have that one album that, like, you know, catapults them into the stratosphere of the great hard rock bands. I think that's all they're missing, really, because they do have a lot of consistency, a lot of good songs, but like Boys Are Back in Town, Jailbreak, that's like your ace. Like, it just seems like a weaker ace compared to, I mean, but that's what you would get, like, if you ask 99% of the people in America. But, you know, AC/DC has Back in Black and Highway to Hell and all these, like, they have that like cluster of like ultra powerful hard rock that also took over the radio that Thin Lizzy just they don't have, for me anyway.
Back in Black is the only album I would compare to their top 3 or 4 albums. So
I'd have Highway to Hell and Power Rage well ahead of any Thin Lizzy album, but that's just me and most people.
Yeah, I'm picking them over AC/DC. I'm also picking them over Queen, probably, but we've talked about that before. So.
No.
All right, everybody. Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think of Thin Lizzy. Drop it down in the comments. Let us know what you think of our lists. Leave your own list as well. Hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you have not done so yet. Check the description to the video for all sorts of links. You'll find Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, our website, our merch store, our Patreon. Check it all out, and we will see you tomorrow for our top 10 favorite Thin Lizzy songs.